Life certainly has an odd sense of humor. Here I am, Anna, simply an ordinary woman who has found herself embroiled in a family drama worthy of a soap show. Allow me to set the scene. On a bright Tuesday afternoon, I'm in the kitchen pondering whether to add extra basil to the spaghetti sauce or whether I'm simply putting it off to avoid going back to the living room where my spouse, David, is chatting with his sister, Sarah. I've been married to David for a while now. He truly is a nice man, but his previous marriage didn't work out. There were plenty of disputes instead of children, I suppose. And there's myself, from a part of my life I don't talk much about, with my 10-year-old whirlwind, Alex. But David's family, especially Sarah, tells a very different tale. She resembles one of those beloved yet hated TV show characters. When David is present, he is always happy and polite, but the moment his back is turned, he becomes a poisonous snake. I prepared myself to face the music and concluded the sauce was good. I heard the last of Sarah as I made my way into the living room. To be honest, David, I think it's really kind of you to adopt Alex as your own, Sarah replied, her voice dripping with something sickening sweet. Not many men would do that. Thank heavens, David was oblivious to the irony. Well, Sarah, Anna has been incredible, and Alex is a terrific little kid. Our family is here. I smiled artificially and entered the room. Since we're talking about family, how about we have supper together? It's nearly prepared. Sarah turned to face me with a sweet grin. Oh, Anna, how beautiful that sounds. David is really fortunate to have you. I was just telling him. I turned back to the kitchen and mumbled under my breath, yeah, luckiest man alive. Dinner went according to plan as the evening progressed. Sarah complimented me on my food, joked lightly about how well I've adapted to living with David, and even offered a few backhanded remarks for good measure. Sarah didn't decide to reveal her actual self until we were cleaning the table. David had given himself a pass to answer a work call, and Alex was upstairs doing what kids his age do when they're not in school. Sarah and I got the moment to ourselves. It was obvious she had been waiting for it. You know, Anna, it's funny, she remarked as she leaned against the kitchen counter, a grin on her lips. How you were able to find a man such as David. You believe that going from being unknown to the lady of the home is quite an improvement. I tried not to lose my calm and tightened my hands. Sarah, I'm not sure what you're getting at. Oh please, Anna, hurry up. We both understand that this is all a huge show for you, as you pretend to be a loving mother and wife. However, don't we both see what this is in reality? A lovely, cozy arrangement. More than I cared to admit, her comments hurt. Sarah, you know what? There isn't time for this. Speak with David if you have something to say. Her chuckle echoed through the kitchen, loud and frigid. Oh, Anna, I wouldn't want to pop your tiny bubble. While it lasts, enjoy it, but keep in mind that I'm observing you, and everyone will discover the truth sooner or later. Who would have thought that becoming a housewife would be like walking into a minefield? Especially with Sarah constantly watching, just waiting to see me stumble. One evening, David broached the subject with a tentative tone, as though he were treading carefully. Anna, I've been thinking, he said as he was fumbling with his fork and avoiding eye contact. With the business taking off, I need more help, and I was wondering maybe you could, step in. Startled, I looked up from my plate. You mean leave my job? Work with you? When David did glance up, his eyes were eager. It's just, Anna, I trust you, and it could work out well for the family as a whole. How do you feel? The choice wasn't made lightly. I cherished the independence my work afforded me. David was correct, though. I felt in my heart that this was the proper thing to do since the family needed me. All right, I sighed. Let's do it for the family. When Sarah unexpectedly stopped by, I assumed it was just another typical day as I was making my to-do list and tidying up after breakfast. Her visits used to be as enjoyable as having a toothache, but she was very different today. Sarah said, I can't believe you quit your job to play house, as soon as David was out of sight. Anna, what is your angle? Gold digger much? I whirled, my heart pounding. "Pardon me. Sarah, this is not about you. I'm doing this for my family." She sneered and rolled her eyes so hard I feared they may get stuck. "Oh, please," she said. "David's had you wrapped around his finger. It is pitiful." Before I could launch a counterattack, David entered again. Glancing at each of us, he questioned, "What's going on here?" Sarah remarked, her voice brimming with hatred, "Your wife was just explaining how she's turned into the perfect little housewife." With a look of perplexity on his face, David's eyes briefly shifted to me before returning to Sarah. "Sarah, I don't like the way you speak. What issue do you have?" Sarah gave a puffy, blowfish-like huff. "My issue? David, your wife is a gold digger. She gave up her work and is now dependent on you. It is visible to everybody." David went crazy at that point. His typically composed expression vanished, and he faced Sarah with an intensity in his eyes that I had seldom witnessed. He said, "My office now," gesturing to the corridor. Sarah gave me a stare strong enough to curdle milk as her jaw clamped shut, and she strode out after David. My heart was pounding as I stood there in the kitchen, unsure of what in the world would happen next. The noise level of the shouting from David's office was low, but the passion was unmistakable. Words like apologies, family, and respect were exchanged, although it was unclear to whom exactly. Then suddenly there was silence. A disturbingly silent silence, as in something significant has just occurred. I was waiting with my breath in my mouth, both expecting and dreading at the same time. Sarah burst through the office door moments later, her eyes flaming with rage and her face the color of a ripe tomato. She blasted by me and up the front door, slamming it so hard the glass rocked, without even looking my way. David emerged from the doorway, appearing as though he had taken 10 hits with a heavyweight. He looked up at me, sighing heavily. "I'm sorry you had to hear that, Anna, but I've had enough of her disrespect towards you, towards us." My prior fury dissipated as I approached him. "Are you okay?" He gave me a close embrace. We're going to be. I simply wanted to let her know that she cannot treat you or any of us in that manner." Sarah vanished from our lives as a ghost after that confrontation. Without any trace of her, days stretched into weeks, and weeks into months. For our family, at least, it seemed as though she had disappeared off the face of the planet. Though it wasn't easy at first, I was able to get the hang of being a housewife very soon. Under my supervision, our house, which was previously merely a place to collapse after a hard day at work, became a well-oiled machine. I also took a quick look at David's financial investing portfolio. It turns out that I was really good at it, possibly better than I had realized. Amidst managing the finances and taking care of the family, life was hectic yet oddly fulfilling. I even started discussing a belated honeymoon with David. We never really had time to do something special for one another after we were married because of his hectic work schedule. Just the two of us, we ought to go somewhere. After supper, he would put his arms around me and say, "Anywhere you want," with a kind grin on his lips. "Yeah," I would reply, sinking back into his hug. "And leave all this," I would point toward our house and the life we had created. "Who's going to keep you from burning the house down trying to make toast?" He would laugh, a warm, deep laugh. "We'll have to assume the risk, I guess. If it means having you to myself for a week, I'll learn how to make toast." But it wasn't just us. With Alex, David was a rock star. He had taken to instructing him in baseball, demonstrating the fundamentals, proper swing technique, and game-changing strategies. I would see them from the kitchen window while they threw the ball back and forth, giggling and applauding. It was everything I had imagined a family would be like. Then, fate threw us a curveball right when we were about to truly settle into this perfect existence. David was gone in an instant, along with all of his energy and future ambitions. They stated it was heart trouble. We were taken aback by the sudden and unexpected event that left us stunned. We're organizing our honeymoon one day, and the next I'm trying to find out how to break the news to our kid that his father isn't returning. Even though it seemed like it should have, the world continued on. Life continued, inevitably unpleasant. The mansion seemed more empty. On David's desk, the financial statements were unopened. In the corner, the baseball glove gathered dust. I started talking to David as if he could hear me in the quiet that followed. I would mutter, holding his pillow close, "You left us too soon," attempting to capture the last vestige of him before it faded. "You know that you promised me a honeymoon," with a toast. Toast was what you promised. David's funeral day was a haze of grief and protocol. My sadness was clutching me so tightly that it was difficult for me to breathe. I was barely holding it together. Sarah seemed strangely disconnected during it all, her thoughts obviously focused on things other than grieving. She had not assisted with any of the arrangements, so on top of my own pain, I had to juggle everything. Those who knew David, including acquaintances, co-workers, and distant relatives, crowded the church as the funeral began. Every story and recollection they shared painted a different image of the man we all missed so much. They spoke well of him. Their obvious regard and love for David provided a little measure of solace amongst the suffering. Subsequently, when the tributes concluded, Sarah had her turn. Even in her anguish, it seemed as though she couldn't bear the thought of not being the focus of attention. As she spoke to the assembled throng, she forced her way to the front and had calculating, icy eyes. Her voice broke through the somber atmosphere as she said, "I need to make something clear. Anna is not one of us. She is here. She's always played the devoted wife and been all about the money, but we all know the real story." As Sarah's allegations flew, murmurs sounded across the room. "She is nothing more than a gold digger. Only adored what my brother could provide for her. I have never loved him. She kept me apart from my own brother and, let me tell you, made my life miserable in order to maintain her position as the only heir." My breath caught at the sheer boldness of her falsehoods. She portrayed me as the antagonist in her warped story, and I just stood there, motionless. With a vicious gaze, she said, "And I'll fight for what's rightfully mine. David's inheritance belongs to his real family, not some outsider and her unknown child." Whispers became louder as the room descended into turmoil, with people taking sides. However, despite the chaos, a startling amount of people turned to look at me with supportive and sympathetic expressions. Both David and we were well known to them. The truth was known to them. I was in a state of disbelief, the hurt caused by Sarah's treachery cutting through my sadness. To stand there on the day we were meant to say our final goodbyes to David and listen to her spew such hatred was intolerable. Dealing with her devious remarks and contempt in private was one thing. It was then that I saw the full extent of her hate. It went beyond simply not getting along with me or disliking our union. For the sake of money and malice, Sarah was prepared to destroy all that David and I had worked so hard to build. Sarah's vitriol compounded the raw, gaping hole left after David's burial. For Alex's sake, I had attempted to keep up a front of strength, but Sarah's unwavering quest for what she saw to be her rightful inheritance tested my fortitude on a regular basis. Days passed, each one a struggle to maintain my composure and keep Alex out of the worst of it. Then, one afternoon, as Alex and I were going through a box of David's possessions, a mixture of laughter and tears adorning our recollections, Sarah burst through our door like a hurricane, her eyes blazing with rage. As she slammed a copy of the will onto the kitchen table where we were sitting, she said, "Explain this to me, Anna. Why does everything go to your son while I, David's blood, get scraps?" I inhaled deeply as I braced myself for the assault. "Sarah, David said exactly what he wanted. He cared about making sure Alex and I were okay." Her angry face twisted as she spit. "Legally speaking, that child isn't even his. He was never adopted by David. I'll take this to court after court until I obtain what's rightfully mine." With big eyes full of uncertainty and terror, Alex glanced from Sarah to me in search of comfort. Squeezing his shoulder, I silently assured him that I would be safe. "Sarah," I said, maintaining my composure in spite of the internal commotion, "you're not correct. David's biological son Alex means he didn't need to be adopted. Her outburst came to an abrupt stop as words stuck in her throat. Her expression of shock was etched on her face as she gasped out a single syllable. "Yes," I said as a wave of stubborn power passed me. "Alex's father is David. Because we wanted to shield Alex from exactly this type of unpleasantness, we never told anyone." "Lies," Sarah murmured, her voice breaking, yet her conviction in her charge faltered. "You're not telling the truth. Show it." Wordlessly, I got up. The floor was scuffed by my chair. I took out the packet that included the birth certificate with David's fatherhood clearly stated on it. I threw it upon the surface just before her. As Sarah took out the paperwork, her hands trembled and her gaze darted between the lines of indisputable proof. Her expression showed a range of emotions, including disbelief, denial, and then a growing recognition of the truth. "The fight leaving her," she said. This can't be," as the reality of her brother's existence, which she believed to be her own, fell apart. "It is," I said, being forceful without being rude. "David cherished Alex. He cherished us. His final request was that we be taken care of. Are you unable to accept that?" Sarah raised her head and met my eyes for the first time benevolently. I had never noticed that kind of vulnerability before. She said, I need to think." She didn't say anything more before getting up, holding the documents tightly and leaving a somber trail of quiet behind her. With wide, curious eyes, Alex, who was still clinging to my side, glanced up at me. His voice was low as he questioned, "Is she going to come back?" "I'm not sure, my love," I answered, encircling him in an embrace. "But we're going to be all right, come what may. The most important thing is that we have each other." Sarah was even more determined to sabotage my son's legitimate inheritance in the weeks that followed the incident. What little serenity we had managed to find in our sadness threatened to be destroyed as her activities culminated in an unlawful struggle. She insisted that I had somehow tricked David into thinking Alex was his real kid, so I could protect our future finances at her cost. Bitter accusations from her led to a demand for unquestionable paternity verification under the law. It was not decided to move forward with a DNA test hastily. It seemed like a betrayal, a last insult that David's memory did not merit. However, it was an essential step to ensure Alex's future security and to confirm his legitimate position as David's son. There was a simmering tension, a hidden struggle between truth and anger, behind the clinical, impersonal procedure. Sarah and I were sat across from one another in the sterilized lawyer's office on the day the findings were due. There was a chasm of unsaid accusations between us. "You're sure you want to do this?" I questioned, breaking the ice. Though a flurry of emotions raced inside, my voice remained calm. Sarah gave a curt nod, her lips barely lining her mouth. "Let's just get this over with," she remarked, a defiant tone in her voice belying her anxiety. The attorney, a third party in this family's strife, opened the envelope with a solemnity befitting the seriousness of the circumstances. He glanced over the paper, then raised his head to look at me, then at Sarah. With a calm tone, he said, "The results are conclusive. Alex's biological son status has been confirmed with great certainty by the DNA study. As a result, he is now David's legitimate successor according to the will." The remarks lingered in the atmosphere, signaling the conclusion of Sarah's campaign of uncertainty. A burden was removed off my shoulders, and the truth that we had always known, as well as David and Alex, were vindicated. As the ramifications of the outcome dawned on Sarah, she sat still, her face losing its color. The battle, the rage, the unrelenting pursuit of what she thought was rightfully hers, all of it fell apart in the face of indisputable reality. "This, I didn't," she stumbled, her confident exterior crumbling. "You see, Sarah, David's first priority was always Alex. Because he was his own, he loved him as his own. It was never essential for us to go through this struggle and this suffering." Sarah averted her gaze, her eyes overflowing with tears that would not come. Sensing our emotional distress, the lawyer indicated, rather subtly, that we might need a pause. I reached across the abyss of our shared sadness as the office door clicked shut behind him, leaving us in a state of uncomfortable truce. Sarah, let's move past this now. We cannot undo the past, but we can choose our course of action going forward for David and Alex's sake. But she will not listen to it. She yelled, "You're going to regret this," and slammed the office door hard as she fled. Alex and I tried our best to preserve David's memory and to pay tribute to him in our day-to-day activities, but time continued to pass without stopping. Then I started to hear bits and pieces about Sarah's present situation via the grapevine. A bleak picture was drawn by the whispers. It seems that Sarah had gotten herself into a financial rut. Her funds couldn't quite sustain her lifestyle, but she'd always had a taste for the better things. After David passed away, the drama surrounding her fortune appeared to tip her over the brink into an extravagant spending and borrowing frenzy. She really thought she'd get everything, huh? While we were chatting over the fence one afternoon, my neighbor Mrs. Thompson remarked something in passing. "Now I hear she's dodging calls left and right, creditors breathing down her neck." I exhaled and squeezed my nose bridge. Yes, it does appear to be. It's unbelievable, but she felt all this chaos was worth it for opulent handbags. Mrs. Thompson gave a disapproving click of her tongue. "Oh, my pride and greed. They induce stupid behavior in others. Really, shame. God rest his soul, your David was never one for such drivel." I felt a complex range of emotions when I learned of Sarah's financial difficulties. Her misfortune held no joy, no feeling of justification. In fact, it served as a heartbreaking reminder of just how shattered our family had become in the aftermath of David's passing. It had been months since the whole drama around the inheritance ended. My phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in a long time, just when I was starting to believe that serenity had returned to our lives. Sarah was there. It was the last thing I expected to hear from her after all that happened. More than anything, curiosity prompted me to respond. "Listen, Anna, I need your assistance." Sarah's voice finally emerged, sounding desperate. She hadn't contacted me previously. I couldn't resist laughing hurriedly. "Aid? That's rather generous of you to say. Did you not say that I wasn't family? What altered?" After a moment of hesitation, she made her plea. "That was in the past. Now is the moment. Anna, I'm all in. I have bills that I must pay off. Aren't we all family?" I was astounded by her request's boldness. "A family? Sarah, you seem to have a short memory. I meant nothing to you when it suited you. And now we're suddenly family in your hour of need?" She attempted to cut me off, but I wasn't having any of it. "It's not like that. That is precisely how it is. Sarah, you haven't altered at all. Even more self-centered than before. You dragged Alex and myself through the muck without hesitation, and now you're asking for assistance." A pause occurred, a hush that said 1,000 words. I could just hear her trying to find some kind of counter-argument, something that would make me change my mind. I just thought. "You made a mistake in thinking." I firmly interrupted her. "Sarah, you made your bed. You have to lie in it now. To be honest, you're not a part of my family. I have my own to take care of, not in light of everything." She was silent for a while, and I briefly wondered whether she had anything else to say. Her voice was tiny and resignational when she finally spoke. "I see. I apologize, Anna, for everything. Sorry, Sarah, just doesn't cut it. Words are not as loud as actions. And you'll manage to get yourself out of this situation. Farewell." As I hung up, I released a deep breath I had been holding. It was like finishing the last page of a book that had too much conflict in it. I was reminded of what was really important when I turned to look at Alex, who was sitting at the kitchen table doing his homework. "Who was that, Mom?" Mid-sentence, Alex inquired, his pencil halting. "Hey, honey, just someone from the past." I smiled and told him, "It's nothing to worry about." I studied him for a while as he nodded and returned his focus to his assignment. Now, this was my reality. My top concern. We had moved past the drama, the arguments, and the never-ending cycle of animosity with Sarah.